Hello, so this evening various ministers have gone to Boris to tell him that it would be a good idea for him to resign, and the response is a stubborn refusal, and in fact Mr. Gove has just been sacked. Well, actually, to a certain extent, I salute Boris for that. That is, A, it's hilarious, and B, it's actually the right thing to do. I would certainly sack Mr. Gove. I would long to sack Mr. Gove. Mr. Gove is everywhere, and now he's not going to be anywhere, at least for a time being. Mr. Gove has tried to play the kingmaker. He's tried to be king himself. He loves power, and now it's been deprived. I think this is the last bite of an extremely cornered snake. But it is an amusing postscript to the most extraordinary story of the resignation of the Prime Minister. This is a Prime Minister who in history books will go down as the man who was defeated by a gay scandal, by somebody groping somebody else in the Carlton Club, and it's nothing actually to do with Boris. What Boris will be accused of is not a lack of truth, because actually many prime ministers have not been entirely truthful. Mrs. Thatcher, for example, some of the things that Mrs. Thatcher came out with were simply staggering, particularly when she was discussing things with Michael Heseltine. In fact, what led to Michael Heseltine's resignation. It was one unbelievable fact after another unbelievable fact that tumbled out of the lady's lips. But she remained in power because what Mrs. Thatcher had, which Boris doesn't have, is she commanded trust. And Boris doesn't. Actually, Mrs. Thatcher could easily have got away with the Chris Pincher story. Mrs. Thatcher could easily have dealt with that. But Boris doesn't know how to. In the end, every time Boris is cornered, he looks like an extremely guilty schoolboy, and the colour rises in his cheeks. I cannot imagine that Mrs. Thatcher or Edward Wilson or Mr. Callaghan would be in that situation. And none of them were necessarily that honest. It's not the job of a Prime Minister to be honest. It's the job of a Prime Minister to manoeuvre around honesty, around truth, and get things done. But the only way you get things done in a democracy is to command trust, and Boris doesn't. So, I'm delighted that he's sacked Gove, but it is probably his last act as Prime Minister. Let's see what happens tomorrow. He's bored out of his mind by this subject. There we are. Off you go.